For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. ANC activist Moe Shaik discusses his book titled The ANC Spy Bible, Surviving Across Enemy Lines. So Moe, don't you think that as a spy you should have kept the information under wraps?
Oh no, that is something I thought long and hard about. And I thought this information, or putting the stuff in the book right now, was more valuable a contribution to the country. So I thought the public interest far outweighs the interest of not speaking about these things.
You were detained in June 1985 while you were protecting an ANC comrade. Tell us about this and about your time in detention.
Well, I saw my going into detention as a necessary part of a mission to keep Comrade Ismail Ibrahim safe. And you must understand that Ismail Ibrahim spent 18 years on Robben Island. He was in the first wave of people who were captured, tried and put into Robben Island, and he came out of Robben Island, he went into exile, and then we brought him into the country for consultations. It would have been just unforgivable if Ibrahim was caught and you know, we don't know whether he would have been killed, but if he was caught and sent back to Robben Island, as our unit, that was an unbearable consequence. Detention is a horrible experience, and my greatest pride is that I was given the task to argue against Section 29 of the Internal Security Act in the negotiations, which I did from very real experience. And I must also say that the people who were sitting on the table, Ernest Creel, he was the Minister of Police at the time, and there was the Justice Minister, Minister Kobi Kutsia. They accepted the argument that in our new democracy, Section 29 has no place. So the act was repealed, and I take great pride from the fact that act was repealed.
You also believe that South Africa does not discuss what people went through in detention. Why do you think this should be discussed?
Well, detention, like apartheid, is a very traumatic experience. It's an experience of deep humiliation, it's an experience of deep shame, and any psychologist will tell you that shame and humiliation lives on in the victims. They don't go away. Everyone else can move on with their normal lives, but the shaming and the deep humiliation stays with the victims. And I think as a country as a whole, we need to understand why we are such a violent society. And I believe, for one, that our violence is related to the experience of apartheid, the experience of trauma, the shame and the humiliation of apartheid that is now getting transferred from one generation to another. And that is just simply unacceptable. As a country, we owe ourselves to heal. As a country, we owe it to ourselves to be able to put the past behind us, but in a way that we see the constructiveness of our past. It allows me to deal with one issue, if you don't mind. The negotiation process, the process by which we got our freedom, the process by which we enjoy our democracy today, was negotiations. And far too many politicians today, ill-informed, unaware of the history of apartheid, speak in very belittling terms of the negotiations. And that is wrong. That is wrong because the greatness of this country was that in its time of greatest need, South Africans came together, irrespective of the harm that was done in the past, to negotiate a way forward. And that is a remarkably humane thing. Talks about the brilliance of the leaderships that we had at the time, and we should celebrate that as South Africans.
Can you also tell us about being recruited by your brother Eunice to join the ANC, which led to your business being used for underground operations?
Yes, again, if you go back into the 70s in our country was dominated by the politics of the Black consciousness movement. Now I know you are beautifully too young to know the Black consciousness movement, etc. But the Black consciousness movement was such an important part of our political history because it gave us as Black people, and yes, I am Black, it gave us as Black people pride and joy, and we reclaimed our identities in the Black consciousness movement. But of course, for me, the Black consciousness movement was a stepping stone to the ANC, which had a more non-racial, more embracing approach, including of white South Africans. And this is when, so politically that resounded more with us. Perhaps it resounded more because if you read the story of my mom, she was part white, right? So in a sense, if we were to become politically consciousness and politically active, we wanted a more broadened identity, and we found that in the ANC, and Eunice found it in the ANC. And when he came home, all excited about being recruited by the ANC, and you got to appreciate how in that time belonging to the ANC or becoming a member of the ANC was such a special honor. It was a special honor. It was a banned organization. It is a very decisive decision you made to engage in the illegal activities in order to remove what we saw an illegal state, which was the apartheid state.
In the book, you also reveal information about a man you refer to as a Nightingale. Can you tell us how you met him and why you call him your hero?
Well, the Nightingale, as it is in the book, a member of the security branch. He was a member of the security branch. And he was in an environment where the security branch had a culture of showing harshness to the people they had captured or detained. Well, this man and one other person, Lieutenant Robert Shaw, in fact showed me kindness. It took me a long while to understand the reason behind that kindness. It took me a long while to understand that kindness was genuine. And of course, he is my hero because the information he gave to the ANC via me, led to a very deep understanding about the other side, and which allowed us to be able to outmaneuver the other side in our way towards freedom. But the beautiful thing about the Nightingale is that he did this while he was on the other side. And when we got our freedom, all of us who got freedom and who were fighting openly on the ANC side were rewarded. He was not, he was not. He's still a man who walks in the shadows, unrecognized, and I think I needed to say that. I needed to say this for him to hear it publicly, that he's my hero. The government may or may not recognize him, but it doesn't matter. But I needed him to say, for him to hear me say publicly that he's my hero.
Do you still have a relationship with the guy now?
I do. We stay in dynamic contact. We are on telephone contact. We are on social media contact, and we come to each other's assistance when we're in need of assistance. And that's the kind of relationship we have. It's a relationship of deep trust, but there's also a relationship of what I call dependency. And dependency is very much part of the intelligence game, where between handler and spy, there's always a level of dependency. And sometimes that dependency is good, and sometimes that dependency is weighty. It's, you feel, and I'm sure he feels in part very much responsible for my life, and I feel in part very much responsible for his life. And that is a responsibility and sometimes a burden.
In the book, you also tell us about your first meeting with former President Jacob Zuma in London. How was it?
That was a fascinating meeting. I was very scared, thinking how would my leaders, and he was just appointed head of the intelligence, ANC intelligence, and I had no idea of how he was going to receive the information. He could have said, this information is absolutely a trap. He could have had me then arrested, sent to Lusaka and in Quattro camp as an agent. But the information was such that it was very credible, and he was very excited about it. And I must say that President Jacob Zuma, as the head of ANC intelligence, was a very professional man, and I admit that openly. He was a very professional man.
You also revealed that you introduced former President Jacob Zuma to your brother Shapir.
And that happened in London, and that happened many years before we got our freedom. My brother was, initially, he was going to be involved in certain section of the specialized electronics department of the ANC. But soon we thought his skills in terms of financial matters, in terms of being able to move money in and out the country for the mass democratic movement, for the underground, for other operations like Operation Vula, etc. He was more skilled in that, and he developed a very sophisticated system to move money in and out the country. And that is when President Zuma came to know him. And when, of course, when Zuma returned to South Africa as part of the negotiation process and then as part of resettling in South Africa, their friendship continued.
It was interesting to read that you were in charge of keeping former President Nelson Mandela secure after his release from jail when he visited KwaZulu-Natal, which you say was a special assignment.
Oh, it was an absolutely special moment. I was asked to provide the security for President Mandela, and this instruction came from Lusaka, from Comrade Joe Nhlanhla. It was also an instruction that was endorsed by the Vula leadership, Spiwe Nyanda, Mac Maharaj, Praveen Gordon, etc. So we threw everything into it. We threw the underground, we worked very closely with General Bantu Holomisa. It was a magical moment. But for me, the real magic was to meet Mandela for the first time. He came on the plane, he was in the Virginia airport. I went to meet him off the plane, and I had to brief him on how everything was going to happen. And I recall he took my hand and he says to me, "I'm an old man, can you please take me to the toilet?" So I had a very intimate moment with him in the toilet, briefing him about what is going to happen and how we're going to go. And then we flew by helicopter. It was him, it was Winnie Mandela, I think some of the support staff, and me on this helicopter that flew from Virginia to Kings Park, I think, where the Kings Park Stadium, where the rally was. And there's this moment when the helicopter is coming, and I think they announced that is Mandela's helicopter coming. The crowd, just the roar that emerged, and we could hear this roar, amidst the noise. The helicopter came into the stadium. Mandela came off the stadium. And of course, it was just a very, very special moment.
Do you still consider yourself a spy?
No, I don't consider myself a spy, but the intelligence method, the method by which this becomes part of your thinking, which becomes part of the neural pathways in your brain, I think that method stays with you forever. Much to the irritation of my wife and my children, because I would always check, double check information. Did you do your schoolwork? Yes, Dad. Okay, when did you do your schoolwork? How did you do your schoolwork? Can anyone witness you did your schoolwork, you know? So after they go through all the questions, they say, Dad, don't you trust me? Just trust that I did my homework. So yeah, so sometimes I got to remind myself that I mustn't apply the intelligence method into everything, you know.
Don't you think that the ANC needs your services at this moment?
Sure, but I don't, and I do render my services. I am very willing and have been willing, and I do engage in certain discussions about how to help the intelligence services through their problems, or the security services through the problem. There's vast skill in this country, and which can be used to correct and to help the intelligence services rebuild today, especially in light of the newer technologies that are available, artificial intelligence, algorithms. But I genuinely believe that the intelligence services need a new kind of person now. They need data scientists, they need computer engineers, they need a different skill set which will help build a capacity in the fourth industrial revolution of what intelligence is going to look like. And if I predict how this intelligence would look like, I think it's going to be what I fundamentally will call surveillance intelligence. It is surveillance intelligence used from integrating a lot of information that comes from the various databases, from cameras, from Facebook, from everything, and it will need the algorithms to be able to make better value of that information. But don't forget that the intelligence agencies have always been obsessed with the question of predictability. Can they predict what will happen in the future, what will happen next year, etc.? And so too are the big data companies. They are obsessed about predictability. They want to predict your behavior so they can sell you a product in that behavior. And that is fundamentally the work of intelligence services.
And lastly, what do you hope the readers will take away after reading your book?
The reader will get beyond the difficult parts, beyond the pain, beyond the issues. They will get a heartwarming story about our country, of how far we have come from those days. And I hope that the reader will see this book as a very important part of their healing, and to reach out, to other South Africans, to understand their stories, not to make assumptions, and to build the kind of humaneness that our country needs as we grapple with the challenges that face us.
That was Moe Shaik speaking to Crema Media's Polity about his book titled The ANC Spy Bible, Surviving Across Enemy Lines.